Allow me to introduce myself.
Hey, what's up? Johnny here, co-founder and product designer of Icosa Brewhouse. This is video 2 of our behind the scenes look at how we're developing our very new line of sensory cups called Avensi Wave. In case you don't know why we're making this or the inspiration behind it, definitely check out video 1. So in this video, I want to talk about how we went from the 3D prints to the working ceramic prototypes and our first time working with ceramic. So for one thing, we wanted to make the ceramic working prototypes because we were developing a completely new technology, which we aptly call bidirectional wave ramps. It's a mouthful. And we wanted to understand what the actual effect is on your sensory experience in drinking coffee. It's one thing to make a product and theorize about how it's going to work, why aeration may or may not help your sensory experience. It's another thing to actually put it to the test. And that was our goal in creating these very first ceramic prototypes. So in order to go from the 3D versions, this is one of the early versions that you might have seen in our surveys, but in order to go from these 2 3D printed prototypes to the working ceramic versions, I had to find help because I can't make ceramic myself. So thankfully, I have a great friend here in Chiang Mai, Thailand, who can handcraft ceramic by himself. And so I enlisted his help to make the very first working prototypes that I'm holding here in front of you. The cool thing about ceramic is that the handcrafted element makes it so unique. There's something poetic and something magical about watching my friend craft these pieces, each one unique in its own way. And to be able to bring an idea that I had just drawn on paper and 3D printed into something that we can actually use and drink out of was a very rewarding experience. So seeing him do what he does best, to create each of these pieces by hand, to make each of these bidirectional wave ramps, he actually had to cut into the side of the cup after spinning the ceramic on a wheel. He would cut into it and he would push these indentations with his fingers and then seal that with some clay slip. And what ends up happening is you can see the bidirectional wave ramps on the inside of this cup and compare that to the original version. So he did the same thing for one for our espresso, and then the second was our tasting cup for pour-overs. And the interesting thing is we didn't just make one cup, we made 3 different cups. And so the reason why we want to do that is I don't want to just put a product out there and not test it or not understand the impact of how it can change coffee sensory. So I made a version without fins. I made a version with just the single wave ramps. And this, as I mentioned in my last video, is good for spinning or swirling in one direction, but not necessarily as good in the other. And that's what inspired the bidirectional wave ramps. So this is good for both swirling left, right, counterclockwise, and clockwise. And what I did was I went to several experts and sensory experts in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and I got them to try the same coffee in each of these cups. And not to ruin the surprise, but there was a difference between how coffee was perceived in the control cup without fins, the cup with the single directional fins, and the bidirectional fins. And that was our proof of concept. So that was our aha moment. And the next step was, what do we do from here? At the same time, that's when we enlisted Miriam Aaron's help to ask her if she was open to testing our very first prototypes. And she coincidentally happened to be preparing for her 2 World Championship competitions in Athens that happened earlier this year. One was the Barista Cup Championship, which she won in her home in the UAE, and the second was the Ibrik or Turkish style of making coffee, which she also won. So she enlisted us to help her make custom cups to use in her competitions. So she asked us to make an espresso cup, a new version of our espresso cup that we were developing, and of course the tasting cup. So these are actually the very first versions of the prototypes that we made for Miriam Aaron. You'll see this one has a very unique blue glaze that she wanted to use for her competition. We didn't end up going with that, and then we ended up making 2 white versions as you see here. Again, one for espresso and one for her e-brick competition, which is also good for brewing pour. A little cool backstory behind this is that glazes in ceramic are so unique. The way that you apply the glaze, the way that it looks after you apply the glaze, and then how it ends up looking can be completely unpredictable and unexpected, and also magical at the same time. But you can see here that with this glaze, it turned out pretty much exactly how we wanted, but it wasn't exactly the color that Miriam liked, so we ended up going with a pure white glaze that was supposed to be glossy. But you can see here, this is more of a stone, pepper, and salt finish. And that was completely unexpected. This was supposed to be just pure white, and it ended up turning into this really cool stone, salt, pepper finish. But that's a story for another time. So the great end to this short segment of this chapter in Avensi Wave was that Miriam ended up winning 3rd place with this cup in her e-brick championship in the world. So that was a great reason to celebrate. But I want to leave you with how we were able to develop and go from paper to 3D print to a working ceramic model, which we've never done before. We usually just work with glass. And how we ended up working with Miriam to help her win 3rd place in the world for the e-brick championship. Stay tuned for the next video where I'm going to be sharing more about the very unique challenges of working with ceramic for the first time and learning how to actually make this work in mass production. Because as you can imagine, the magic of handcrafted ceramic is very different than trying to make something in mass. So I'll share that with you in the next video.